Hey, Jenna, I'm so happy you're here on the Choose Africa podcast. Please introduce yourself and tell everybody listening about the amazing work that you're doing.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me, Valerie. My name is Jenna Piché. I am a time management and leverage coach for entrepreneurs and team leaders to help them reclaim their time and repurpose it in the areas that truly matter the most, whatever that means to them. I got into this work because, like a lot of entrepreneurs, I was a type A workaholic, worked in corporate for 20 some odd years in marketing and healthcare, and really defined myself by my work. But after having kids, I had a health scare and realized I really had to reprioritize how I was spending my time so I could put my money where my mouth is, because I truly believe that they are the biggest impact I can leave on this world. And so I really needed to reevaluate how I was spending it, investing it. Mm-hmm. So now that's what I help people do. I get to help them evaluate how they spend their time. How can they do it better? And really, ultimately, it ends up helping them show up better in the world, in their relationships, in their life, in the way they really want to.
That's amazing. I think everybody in my world is always saying, like, I don't have enough time. I'm so stressed. I'm so overwhelmed. And it's nice to know that you've been there too. And then you've just like found your way out and you're helping other people out of the chaos. Tell me more about like when you had that health scare and you had kids and you realized you had to prioritize, what were the first things you did to kind of start digging yourself out of the pit?
Yeah. Well, the first thing I did was really take a step back and say, hey, if I'm not healthy, I can't give any part of me to my work or to anything else. You know, I call myself a recovering workaholic. I would work those 7 to 7s. And then when I had kids, it's like, I can't work 7 to 7 anymore. So then I'd feel guilty when I was with the kids that I was working, and I'd feel guilty at work that I was thinking about the kids and wasn't getting things done. So I was just like, I just need to create space to make sure that I'm healthy, because if I can't show up, you know, in that way, then it doesn't matter. So my health in particular, and then energy management became a really big focus of mine. So I don't recommend everybody do this, but I actually went out and got a functional health coaching certification because I was just so intrigued by what are the biohacks I can do? First of all, what's the baseline that I need, right? Am I missing nutrient deficiencies? Am I getting enough sleep? Am I really hormonally balanced? All of those things that sometimes we don't have the data for. So I went out and got that. But then I was looking at, well, what is the science of focus? And how can I make sure that when I actually sit down, I have the energy to do the thing? So I feel like I can actually shut it off because I got something done today. So that was my first step. And biohacks and all of that is really an area I geek out. So we can talk about that if you want. But beyond that, then I really realized, okay, I can't do it all. And I know that some people really try, and even society is like, yeah, sure, you can have the job and have the kids and do all these things. But what they're not showing is that these people don't sleep and they're on email at 3 a.m. and just not living a healthy life. So I then, took a real look inside with myself, with my husband, and we decided these are truly our priorities. This is where we want to spend our time. And then it's really been a huge experiment of what's going to work here and what isn't. And so it's been a lot of prioritization, experimentation, repurposing, and saying no to some things that we always thought we would say yes to.
Oh, that's so good. Okay, I have so many follow-ups from this, but real quick, because you just ended it there, what are some of the things that you say no to now?
Yeah. So I feel like early on in our careers, we say yes to everything, right? Every opportunity that comes our way, because we don't want to miss out on the opportunity that could take us to the place that we're bound for, right? Our potential. But as we get older, we get a little bit more experience in our careers. We start to feel what feels good and exciting and what doesn't. And I truly do believe that our body can tell us what feels good and what doesn't if we just listen to it. So there were times that I would say yes to opportunities, and then I would dread them. I would dread getting ready for it. I would dread doing the work. I would go to present it, and I would feel my body shake as I was on a call presenting. And I said, something here is not right. So I started listening to that intelligence, which I think was really helpful. And I should have listened in the first place, right? But sometimes when you don't listen, your body's like, well, let me make it more dramatic.
Yeah.
So the shaking in certain calls, the dread was one sign that I was really not aligned with what felt good, with what was in alignment. But then there were even really good things that started coming our way that we had to say no to, right? Because we can't say yes to everything and still expect to, be able to put our kids to bed. I grew my business and my corporate career through a lot of networking, through going to things, through taking every meeting. And after having kids or, having a health scare or whatever, you realize I need to create space for what's important to me. So I started saying no to any event after 4 p.m. so I can pick my kids up from school. If I'm going to network, it happens in the morning. I say no to certain engagements or opportunities based on if I feel like the client aligns with me as a person, because I don't want to dread getting on a call with someone. And I understand that this is a privileged place to be. Now I'm in a place where I get to choose that business. But some of us have worked for people that we dread even getting in a meeting. And so those are the boundaries that I start to draw now. But I work with clients who are, the best intentioned, and they're their room parent, their PTO chairperson, they're working 60 hours a week, and they're supposed to have a date night and spend time with their kids, eat healthy. And it's like, well, something has to give. So sometimes we have to negotiate out of committees or negotiate out of certain commitments, even if just for a certain season, to make space for our priorities.
Oh, that makes so much sense. I think when I first started my business, I would do the trick where I would work a full day, get off by like 4:35, be with my kids. And then as soon as they went to bed, by 7:30, I was online again, thinking that I was like, balancing, like that was my version of balance because I was still with my kids. And then of course you cannot sleep. Like after you're just like, after you've been dealing another 3 hours on your computer, couldn't sleep, woke up, still tired, so cranky. And I did that for months and months. And I was like, this is not working. And now it's so nice to never have to work at night again after my kids are sleeping. Like that's just like a thing I just don't do anymore. And our business is like better than ever. So
So a couple pieces to what you just said. I feel like a lot of us, especially after having kids, if you have kids and you're listening, do that same thing. We're like, I want to spend that time, but I still have so much I want to get done. And what we don't take into consideration is the energy we have in that space. So when we're tired, the work takes longer and the quality suffers. But we still think, I'm going to push through this thing. There's a really interesting study done where they took two groups of workers and they told the first to work 80 hours a week and they told the second to work 40 but pretend like they worked 80.
Wow.
And then they asked managers, who do you think is more effective? Who do you think is getting the work done? And the managers couldn't tell the difference.
No way.
Yeah, isn't that crazy? Because for every extra hour of overtime we put in, we're only getting about 30 minutes of effort because our brain just isn't firing in the way that it wants. So breaking into the biohacks, it's actually more effective to close the laptop, get 8 hours of sleep so we can show up with a clearer brain and do the work faster than to stay up late and get up early trying to burn the candle at both ends just to go through the motions.
That is such a crazy study. Do you think there's like an optimal amount of hours that humans should work each week? I know 40 hours is kind of like what we do, but it's kind of like almost like a default. It's not based in, I don't think, any science. What do you think, or what do you do?
I think that came from the Industrial Revolution, right? So I don't know what it truly is. I'm not sure that there's an ideal situation. I think it depends for each. You talk to some people and they're like, if you're truly running your business and not working in it, you only need to work 20 hours but depending on the stage of your business, I think it's going to ebb and flow. I have folks who've been in their business and they've worked 60-hour weeks and now they have teams of 5 or 10 and they say, I want to work 20. Great. If that's what serves your life, it's all about what you want. But the interesting piece to the what is true, there are Nordic countries are actually really great at this. And I know some US based countries have started to do this where they either institute a 6-hour workday rather than an 8-hour workday, or they do a 4-day work week. And they found that those people get just as much done as people working a 40-hour work week because they've got a constraint, which is actually a really great thing. But in a 40-hour work week, we really only get like 35 productive hours.
Right.
So we're not losing anything, or companies aren't losing out on any productivity because of it.
I agree. I internally, our team takes off Friday afternoons. Like as long as you finish your work, if you haven't, do it. Or use it as like quiet time, like focus time. But if not, yeah, after 12 p.m. on Friday, I have found that I'm so much of a happier person with an afternoon to myself. It's like the only 3 hours I get to myself before the weekend where again I'm like the mom and we're doing all the play dates. But yeah, it makes such a big difference. So
So
question for you. Yeah,
I
go
was
for
just
it.
going to say, so with that in mind, it's really interesting then to look at your personal energy levels and know, for example, for you, you know that after or noon on a
Mhm.
Friday, you're not going to be worth anything. You know, there's people who are like, I'm not worth anything before noon, especially creatives who are like, my
Mhm.
brain doesn't start firing until like 3 or 4 p.m. Great. So I call that your superhuman time. Find that space, block it and protect it. So if you could only work 90 minutes today, what are the 90 minutes you want? And then
Mm.
protect that time. Same for me. Like, I don't want to work on a Friday afternoon. And I tend to look at my financials as a business owner on Friday mornings, but I try to make it special and I kind of earmark that time. So then I
Mhm.
know, okay, my brain's going to be checked out Friday afternoon. So let me get this done. Let me feel good about it and go into the weekend.
So cool. It's so smart. I think it's like giving yourself permission to really like do what you really want to do. Like you have the permission, but sometimes it's hard to give it to yourself, I think, as a business owner.
Mhm.
Um, so when you first start working with a busy CEO, what is the first thing you task them with? Or how do you first start working together?
Yeah. So the first thing we do is a time audit. And sometimes this scares folks, but it gives us so much opportunity just to get a snapshot of where you are. So if you're feeling out of control, if you're feeling overwhelmed, anxious, chaotic, it's really important to understand what is creating that feeling. So then we can try to prevent it and work it out. So that looks like for 2 weeks, tracking ideally every 15-minute increment. But ultimately, we just want to get a snapshot of how you truly are spending your time. So everything from what time you went to bed, what time you woke up, what your morning routine looks like, to your whole workday, in between meetings. And then even like I went to the water cooler, I walked around and talked to some employees for a while. I scrolled Instagram for 2 hours before I went to bed, right? Just
Mm.
it's important to be really honest because we don't see the opportunity if we are trying to make it look good, but we're not truly giving ourselves an accurate snapshot. And then with that data, it's so interesting because I often don't even have to tell clients, let's rearrange this, this, and this. They do this exercise and they're like, I already know the first thing I got to do. Like, I got to set an
Mm.
alarm and get to bed on time. I got to stop putting my phone next to the bed. So I just pick it up and scroll in the morning or check email and then I'm anxious. So they usually come up with their first one or two steps, which is really helpful because then they are the solution once they actually see a clear shot of the problem. Beyond that, the next thing we do is we actually dive into mindset because a lot of us are programmed, like I'm sure you've talked about in the past. Money is a scarcity thing. A lot of people have a lot of beliefs around money. There are also a
Mhm.
lot of beliefs we carry around time in a very similar way. So I ask my clients to fill in the sentence, time is blank.
Oh, wow.
And sometimes I get answers like infinite, and other times I get scarce, uh,
Mm.
choice, which could be good or bad, right? I get to
Mhm.
choose, but I have to choose. Chaotic, not enough, too much to do, too little time. And then we really start unpacking, well, why do you feel that way? Because I believe in the power of making a choice, and our beliefs are
Mm.
choices. So the way we fill in that sentence really pulls back to a belief that we have that maybe we were given as a kid, or maybe we were, inserted somewhere along in our career. But if I believe that time is scarce, and that's my belief, then my thoughts are going to be rushed and I have too much to do, too little time. And then
Mhm.
those thoughts are going to lead to feelings of anxiety and overwhelm and chaos, which is going to lead to my actions of feeling like I have to stay up late and do all these things. And then my results are
Mm.
going to be haphazard and not to my potential because I believe time is scarce and I don't have enough.
How would
So,
you fill in that blank?
yeah, when I started this work, I would have said not enough.
Mm,
Time is not enough, meaning
same.
too much to do, too little time. Now I look at it as time is an investment. I get to choose.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
good. That's
Yeah.
really beautiful. Oh,
And
that's
it's
amazing.
because so many people spend it in very unconscious ways. So I like to
Mm.
think about how do we invest it in line with our priorities.
Oh, that's beautiful. Back to the time audit. I've done that. Very eye-opening in kind of a hard way.
Right?
I realized I was spending, I think, 12 hours a week on email. And I was like,
Mm,
what? On
yeah.
it, like, because I was like, okay, so 10% of my time should go to marketing, 10% should do here. I never even factored in my inbox as like something I did. But truly, 10 to 12 hours, 25% of my week was emailing people.
Yeah.
What are some of the surprising things that what are the things I guess that most people that come to you are spending their time on that they really shouldn't be, that you're like, come
Well, you hit
on.
the nail on the head with email. I think a
Okay.
lot of us look at email as a to-do list and we keep it open all day, which is a huge mistake because
Mm,
email is just the easiest way for me to get on your to-do list and then you to actually prioritize it. So it's not prioritized. It's not aligned with what your goals are or the time that you have today.
mm-hmm.
So that is a great first place where we start. Another one is meetings. You know, half of people would rather wait in line at DMVs than sit in another status meeting.
Mm,
And I don't blame them because a lot of our meetings are extremely ineffective. So we really audit meetings and talk about how can we make it better? What can we pull back on? What can we do instead of meetings? So that's really helpful. But then it's just creating an intentional plan for our days, our weeks, and being proactive rather than reactive.
mm,
And it takes us,
mm-hmm.
maybe 30 to 60 days to switch into proactive mode. But we're always talking about what are the decisions that today Valerie can make so that future Valerie will thank her. And those
Mm,
are things like, blocking out time to do certain projects so the important work actually gets done and doesn't fall prey to the urgent. Uh,
yes.
Other things are let's look honestly at what could be done by someone else. So we follow the EAD, eliminate, automate, delegate. So when we look at what people do you first eliminate? Can you eliminate that thing? Does it have to be done? Or are you just doing it because someone once told you you needed to do it, but it doesn't matter? If you can't
Mm-hmm.
eliminate it, can you automate it? Can you use a template, a software, something to make it faster? And if you can't do that, and it absolutely has to be done, that can it be delegated? There's a fantastic book called Buy Back Your Time by Dan Martell. If folks on this haven't read it, it's a great read. But
I love it.
yeah, one of the things I love that he talks about is the buyback rate and the pain line. So this idea that we get so overwhelmed because we are doing tasks below our pay grade. So if
Mm-hmm.
we take essentially what we pay ourselves in the business and divide it by 2,000, which is roughly our working hours in a year, then that's your rate. And if you're just starting out, maybe your rate's not that high. But if you've been in business for a while, you likely know that your buyback rate is hopefully $50 to $100 at least.
Mm-hmm.
And if that's the case, then why are you spending your time on $10 tasks?
Mm,
Like answering emails, like setting your own meetings, like planning agendas, things like that, that just are above your pay grade that other people could do for you. So we really look at what's the value of your time? What can you offload and delegate? And then how do you find the people that you can delegate that to? How do you train them? And once they are up and running, like a VA with you or a new team member,
mm-hmm.
whatever that is, then we look at, okay, now I just bought back, in your case, 12 hours a week, maybe, or call it 11 if you still have to spend some time. What am I going to do with that 11 hours now? And then we get to be really intentional about how we reinvest that time so the business can grow and can align with where you want to go in life.
So good. I love that book. A lot of clients have come to us after reading that book.
Yeah.
So, real quick, what are your maybe one or two favorite tips on how someone works with a VA? How do you check in with them? How do you have transparency? Do you encourage them to meet daily, weekly? What does it look like for you?
Yeah. So the first thing I love for folks to do with a VA is just let the VA shadow. Let them understand what life is like for you because they can often come up with ideas of how you can save time that you don't even see yourself. we have such blind spots when it comes to where we're wasting our time that if you just let them spend a few days with you virtually on a Zoom or in person, they can really learn so much about not only where you're wasting it, but also how you operate, how you move in the world, how you talk to people, what's important and what's not. So I think that's extremely valuable. So in the beginning, I would love to say you're spending time daily with your VA, maybe for the first couple weeks. Beyond
Agree.
that, I really love a morning touch base. So here's what came in yesterday. I love the people who can operate on the level and they find a quality VA that their VA gets to work before they do. And so when they show up in the morning, they touch base with their VA and their VA is like, here's the questions that came up yesterday that I couldn't answer. Can you help me walk through these? Now, here are the priorities I see for you for today. Can you imagine showing up as a CEO and saving the brain power of what do I have to do? Where do I need to be? All the things. And your VA comes to you and is just like, these are your priorities as I see them today. Is there anything, that I'm missing here? And as you do that back and forth, the work feels easier. You get more in flow because you're worried less about what needs to happen and you can focus more on making the stuff happen to move the business forward.
Yep. Oh, that's amazing. Okay, I love that. And how do you, last question about VAs, how do you have them work together? Do you have them use like a project-based like Asana or like Monday, Excel, EOD reports? How do they actually track what the VA is doing?
Yeah. So I think it depends on how big the team is. So if you have a larger team and you're using a VA, then something like an Asana or any other kind of project management system might be extremely valuable so people can track what's going on. If you're a solopreneur, I don't think any of that is necessary. I think really just the back and forth touch base is really helpful. And again, in Dan's book, he talks about this email GPS. So you can go in and see what your assistant is doing. You can look at the emails they sent. You can give feedback. They can hold emails before sending so you can review them. So I think as a solopreneur, you likely don't need as much of that. I do recommend, though, that they create some kind of SOP or guidebook of the work that they're doing while they're doing it so that you get a good idea of what they are doing, how they are approaching it. So you get that insight. Ultimately, I think it's really just a transparency. And again, touching base once a day really helps. Here's what I worked on. Here's what I did. Or here's what you asked me to do. Here's what I did. What kind of feedback would you give me is really helpful. As far as a bigger team, I really am a proponent of project management systems. I think they save so much time with meetings and status updates and chasing down things. So that's a great way for teams to really stay on top of things and save time.
Oh, I agree. That makes so much sense to me. Okay, now we have to move on to biohacks because I did not know that about you at all. I recently got my blood test done because I started working with like a registered dietitian who's really into like gut health and hormone health. And I was actually so blown away that I'm like, I eat healthy, I exercise. Like I feel like I'm like the epitome of like health. But then, yeah, my hormones were totally off. And it was like, oh, so like that's why like certain things aren't working as fast as I'd want them to. So tell me more about some of your biohacks and like your favorite ones.
Yeah. Well, I think the first one you just hit on is just, it's really helpful just to get a snapshot of where you are. So even now, after going through my health journey and struggles, I go in once a year and get blood work just so I have a baseline to understand what's going on. Because if anything were to happen, I want to know where my quote unquote baseline is so I know where I'm at. So I think that's a really great step for everyone to have. The next piece is just to be curious and experiment, right? So you were able to find things that you thought you were doing extremely well. The first, honestly, is nutrition. I mean, there's so many nutrients that are depleted in our food system now for many reasons that I won't go on that diet diet, but even eating a healthy diet isn't enough for us to get the nutrients we need. So a lot of us are nutrient deficient. And there's a lot of really great ways that we can support ourselves if we are just educated to that. And things like having electrolytes in our water and making sure that we are getting enough protein. So there's a lot of really great things there. I'd also say that making sure we're hydrated. I know these are simple things, but so many of us, or even adding hydration because you had a diuretic like tea or coffee,
Mhm.
turns out you need to drink more water after those things. So those are really great. But then as we dive in more, we can start thinking about brain health. So, what are the sorts of things that our brain needs to really show up and focus and fire on all cylinders? And that can look like maybe waiting to have your cup of coffee or your caffeine. Don't have it immediately when
Mhm.
you wake up. Wait an hour or two, because then that kick really hits you when you start work
Mhm.
as opposed to just making it through your morning. Being really intentional about your circadian rhythm. So there's some really great research that talks about how important it is to go to bed at a consistent time and wake up at a consistent time.
Mhm.
Move your body, try to get out in the sunlight. So those are really helpful. You mentioned staying on your computer until not all hours of the night, but some people I
Right.
know it's all hours of the night. And that blue light hits our retinas and tricks us into thinking that it's still daytime. So we don't produce
Mhm.
melatonin. And melatonin is the hormone our body needs to fall asleep and stay asleep. So if it's hard for you to fall asleep at night, you might try cutting back on your screens or getting a really high quality set of blue light blockers so that your body can produce melatonin and try to improve that sleep quality.
So smart. I've done a couple of these starting in January, where I actually got rid of caffeine as like an experiment. I started going to bed at the same time. I started putting my phone away earlier, and my quality of sleep, like 10 out of 10. Like it's so good. It's so deep. I didn't even realize sleep could feel so good until I
Mm.
did these experiments. So it's kind of like you mentioned, you have to be curious, you have to try things. But yeah, following these rules like that you mentioned about caffeine and sleep and phone, it really does work. I think people, if anything, I hope that's like the takeaway of today's episode because I feel so much better after doing those things.
Yeah, so two challenges. One is the phone charger challenge. So move your phone out of the bedroom,
Oh.
charge it in the bathroom, charge it right outside the bedroom, somewhere where if you still have an alarm, you can hear it. But
Mm-hmm.
then it resists the urge to grab it first thing in the morning or look at it right before you go to bed. So that can be really helpful. And the other one is caffeine. So trying to cut caffeine 10 hours before bed. So if you want to go to bed tonight at 10, trying to make sure you're done with it by noon. And people metabolize caffeine differently, but I bet you'll start to notice that you can fall asleep easier if you cut caffeine 10 hours before bed.
100% agree. No, it's amazing. And I love that your work has both elements because it doesn't matter if you're saving time if you still feel kind of yucky during that time. So
Right.
it is like you need both. Okay, just to close out, we always ask our guests, have you ever been to the African continent? If so, where? If not, no worries. Where would you want to go?
Yeah. So I was very fortunate in high school to go to Spain with my high school Spanish class, and then we took a trip across the channel to Morocco. So we
Oh,
did just a day there, experiencing the markets with a guide, and got some curious monkeys on our backs stealing
uh-huh.
things. So that was really neat. But I would love
That's
to
cool.
go to Cape Town and experience South Africa.
Uh, South Africa, honestly, it deserves its reputation. It's so good. Cape Town, especially, is one of my favorite cities. But all of South Africa is really cool.
Hmm.
When I first did my backpacking trip into Africa, I remember being so afraid. And then as soon as you fly into Cape Town, you see like the oceans, the mountain, you arrive, it's like the best wine ever. I was like, I think I'm going to be okay. Like, I think I'm going to survive. And it ended up being like coolest country. And I was like, cool trip.
You just said my three favorite things: the ocean, the mountains, and wine. Sign me
You
up.
got me. Sign me up. That's all you need. Oh, that's amazing. Well, we know plenty of people in Cape Town, so let me know if you ever end up there.
I'll look you up.
But thank you so much, Jenna, for joining. Is there anything else you want to tell everybody before we leave them with where to find you?
Absolutely. I think the first step in this area, if you're feeling overwhelmed, anxious, chaotic, is really to take a deep breath and realize that you can get everything done that's important.
Mhm.
So it's just a matter of changing your perspective to I will do what I can with the time that I have, and recognizing that not everything is important in this season. To
Mm.
your point, some of us don't give ourselves permission to let go of things. So this really becomes a journey of what is truly important and what can I let go of.
That's so good. And where do we find you?
Yeah. So if I can provide any resources, I'm at Jenna.Piché, Piche, on Instagram. And if you want to go there and comment meetings, I can send you a meeting audit to help you save some time in that way.
Love that. That's amazing. And we will link that in the show notes. So thank you again, Jenna. We loved having you here.
Thank you so much for having me, Valerie.